Now, one more thing to take note of is the presence of the semicolon. For one statement SQL, it's optional. Some vendors sell SQL servers that insist on having semicolon for all statements, and that is something that is kind of a flavor dependent, uh, depending on whether you on which version of SQL you use. For SQL Lite, it is pretty tolerant. It is optional, but let's build up a habit. Because if you have multi-line SQL statements, then all SQL servers will require you to have semicolons to separate the statements. So it's very much unlike Python, where a new line is enough to separate the statements logically as well as visually. So the new line serves as dual purpose. For SQL, a logical statement is everything until a semicolon or end of that text block. Yeah. So if I put a semicolon here, it's tolerable, no problem. You can have a lot of new lines there. You can also break them apart like this. It's not a problem, but of course, it's a problem for us to read. For SQL, it's not a problem. Yeah. But again, stick to good practice to ensure readability. Now let's just run this and see. All right, so this is the execution button. Execute the query. And there you go. All right, so we have first of all, the table is already there. And no, sorry, the table is not already there. And now we have a one here. And indeed, it is a customer table that is being created. And we have the quick timing of 2 milliseconds. That part is not really important. For now, let's look at our customer. So we click inside, we see 3 columns, and that's our schema. If you double click on the customer itself, we get a nice screen that is basically looking quite familiar, right? Yeah. Had we filled in using this screen just now, we would have created the same schema here. Okay, so there are 2 ways to create the table via this usual visual guide user interface to click and select, and via a text SQL command, just like what we have seen. Okay, so now let's close this. If I run this statement again, create the table again, what would happen? Okay, let's run it. Nothing happens because the table was already there, thanks to our use of if not exists. If we don't have and we run this, you will see an error flashing out. Okay, it already exists. And because we are in interactive mode, we run one statement at a time so we know the cause and the effect. But if you have a chain of SQL commands, it will break right there, much like your Python program is being forced to stop with an exception. So definitely you wouldn't want this to, happen without the slightest idea that it could happen. So always protect your creation of table with the if not exists. Okay, good. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert some data, because if you click on the customer table, you will see, and under this is the schema, yes, but we click the data, it has no meat. It has this beautiful structure, but it has no content. So what we want to do is to add in more data via programmatically, right? Via these commands, insert into customer the values, right? So I just do a quick one, Kate. So like Python, strings are encapsulated by double quotation, and 12. What's that? One row. Basically, just repeating the slides example. Okay, 2, 3, and we just quickly change that to Bill and Mary, and the address is 4 Orange Street and 3A and then 11. Okay, so now that we have this, let's run it. Now we are quite sure that this table will not be having syntax error, right? So let's just run it and see. Aha! So what happened? rows affected 3. So we know that 3 rows have been added, and they are 1, 2, and 3. Now, this is the part where if your tools open configuration dialog, this box here, if it had been checked, then nothing will run. Only one command will run at a time. You have to move down your cursor, run again, move down your cursor, run again. But because I've advised you to uncheck this and apply, wherever your cursor is, when you click run, it will run again. All right, so it will run, sorry, it will run everything from beginning to end, irregardless of the position of your cursor. So definitely remember that. Now, so we are sure that we have our data there. Actually, I thought we had this. Okay, so this is our our window, but we open up just now without the data being added, and then we insert it, and so this window has not been refreshed. So all we need to do is to click this refresh button, and we should see the new data presented nicely and almost like in Excel. Except Excel, you cannot do this. I'm sure you can do it, but with macros and all that, it's not quite the same in terms of programmatic view of how you create and manage the data. So back to our editor here. Now we need to add in 4 Peter 9 Wall Street. So what do we do? If we insert one more line and say insert into customers 4 Peter, etc., then when we run it, the create table is not a problem. But insert into, that is exactly where I mentioned that we are forcing SQL to repeat a primary key value that is not supposed to repeat, right? So insert into the customers table a 1, 2, 3 primary key values. So those are clashing with existing 1, 2, 3. So that would be an error. So let's see what happens. Okay, error while executing, unique constraint fail on the ID, and that's because of this. That's because of this. No, sorry, that's because of 1, right? 1 clashes and then it stops right there. So we can use insert or ignore and say insert or ignore into this, right? So for the first 3, in fact, we can also do that for Pete. We know Peter hasn't been added yet, but if it hasn't been added yet, there should be no clash, so the ignore part shouldn't run. So now we have protected our insert, much like we have protected our create table if not exist, using if not exist. So let's run this and see. Okay, good. So we ran 4 insert or ignore. Programmatically, those 4 commands were executed, were run. However, only 1 row is being affected because only Pete was successfully added. So let's take a look at our customer again. And if we refresh, we see Pete, right? Peter. Now, if we run again, all commands are being executed, including create table and the 4 inserts, but no row was affected. So what this means is that your program now receiving a 0 knows that the database is intact. Nothing has changed, which is good sometimes because you know that the integrity is being preserved, right? Sometimes we want to test insert. So insert or ignore. If it succeeds, means great, we have updated this set of data into our database. But if it fails, row affected 0 means okay, good. The entire row has actually been recorded previously, so don't need to add another duplicate row. Okay, so that would be for insert. Let's come back to our slide. Next, let's look at our update. So here, when we update a data, what that means is a row of data, we are not inserting a new row. So in other words, the primary key in particular doesn't change. It has to be an existing one. So if you try to update a table with non-existing primary key, then basically no row, 0 row will be affected. Now, the interesting thing is instead of searching for primary key, identifying the row, then update, Update takes more like a constrained view. That means it first filter off all the rows, and only those rows that we want to update, and then goes to the column one, and sets the entire set of column ones to value one, right? So if we filter off, suppose we have 4 rows, and we filter off 2 rows, leaving us with only 2 rows that we are interested in. Then we say set name to ABC. Then all the 2 rows names will be set to ABC. Column 2 address to 1, 2, 3. Then all the columns address will be set to 1, 2, 3. The way we filter is by condition, this where condition. So for example, we can say where ID is greater equal to 3. Okay, good. So that filters off 1 and 2, and then it leaves us with 3 and 4. That's how it goes. And interestingly, we don't have to use ID to filter. We can always use name. When name equals to Peter, then change his address. It's a Wall Street, it's I don't know, Door Street. Yeah. So if we need to do that, then just use update. Okay. Now, if we leave out the where, that means there's no filtering. That means all the rows will be affected. So if we say set column, the column name's name is column's name is name to no name, then all the rows names will be set to no name. So we can just clear out the entire column using this. So sometimes it's good that we want to, for example, in a game, we might want to say reset the database, reset everyone's score to 0, no matter who you are. Then just update table, set total score or high score equals to 0 for everybody. So let's try this out. Okay, so right here, we have already built up a very sort of a tolerant, fault tolerant set of SQL commands, because even if we repeatedly run this, we just get back rows affected equals to 0. So nothing happens, no error messages. And what we can do now is to say, we can append onto it. I just copy and paste it. Update customer, set address. So someone's address needs to be changed, and that is who? Bill's, right? So Bill has moved, and we identify Bill as ID equals to 2, and then run it. Okay, so let's run it.